Good evening, 6:02. It is July the 12th, and this is our July meeting of the Town of Spencer Board of Aldermen. And with that, we do have all of our members present here tonight. So we do have a full board and quorum present. Alderman Steve Miller is going to give our invocation.
Okay, if everybody will bow their heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for being with us today and looking after us in your world. Look after our town citizens and our employees that work every day. Give us the wisdom and humility to be supportive of each other. Give us the strength to help us make our community, your community, with your blessing. We give it in your name. Amen.
Amen. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Board, you have your agenda before you. And so I will ask at this point, do we have any adjustments to the agenda that need to be made? Yes, Mr. Franzese.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. In front of you, there is an item we would like to add to the agenda, and this is related to our fiscal year-end 21 audit. That process, unfortunately, is still in the final stages, and the update is on this cover sheet here, and basically there were still some items that were needing to be identified and resolved in terms of the numbers matching up. That has been corrected, and we expected the final report to get submitted today, and then found out that the auditor was sick today. And so that withstanding, even if it had been submitted today, we would still need this amendment because the LGC would not accept an audit without the amendment in place for the contract. So I'm disappointed that we're yet again talking about last year's audit, but this is where we are. We appreciate adding this to the agenda for your consideration.
All right, so with that, my recommendation to the board would be that we add that immediately following our departmental reports. That will give Mr. Softly a opportunity to update us on that. So we'll add that actually as item 13. Is the board agreeable to that?
Sure. Yep.
All right. Any other adjustments to the agenda?
Yes, item 10. It's not a request for the Spencer JC's movie nights. It's a Spencer movie nights, period.
Okay.
The JC's are only volunteering to host it.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So we'll make that minor correction to remove the reference to JC's on item 10. Anything else?
And am I misremembering, but for some reason I thought that Sky was going to be here. Is it, or is that August that she's going to make a presentation?
I
think it's
she was originally planning to talk tonight with you all about some grant opportunities related to the art program. She is now planning to do that in August. There was one grant opportunity that had a deadline prior to then, but she's determined at this point that one's not going to be feasible, and so she's going to be doing that in August.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right. With that, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move to adopt the agenda as corrected.
All right. The motion by Ms. Sledge.
Second.
Second by Mr. Muhammad. All in favor? All right. All opposed? And our budget or agenda is set for this evening. And the next item is recognitions. We do have one recognition, and that is a recognition of not that of Independence Day, which we recently celebrated on July the 4th. And so I will read that proclamation at this point. Whereas of all the days in the year, one of the most significant to us as a nation is the 4th of July, which marks the anniversary of the signing of our Declaration of Independence. And whereas July 4th, 2022 marks the observance of Independence Day, and whereas on this day we renew our allegiance to our country, to the principles of self-government, and to the spirit of freedom, which is the source of its strength, while remaining deeply aware that in many quarters of the globe, this freedom is not accessible to others. And whereas the citizens of this nation live in freedom won through the great sacrifice and many tribulations which provided the foundation for a prosperous and independent life. And whereas the freedom of mankind is indivisible and our land must play a central part in defending and developing the well springs of freedom, not only for ourselves, but for our friends and allies. And whereas the observance of the 4th of July holiday allows for each of us to reflect and contribute to making our communities better with increased opportunity for all of our citizens. And whereas the town of Spencer believes it is fitting and proper to recognize this freedom and to honor the nation which proves it. Now, therefore, I, Jonathan D. Williams, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the town of Spencer, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim July 4th, 2022 as Independence Day in the town of Spencer, and encourage all of our citizens to recognize the privilege of American citizenship with appropriate celebrations and observances. Okay. And at this time, are there any other recognitions the board would like to make? All right, hearing none, we will now move into the public comment section of our agenda. We do have one person signed up for public comment, and that is Miss Leslie Talbot.
Mine is more, Leslie Talbot. I live at 308 North Salisbury Avenue. I'm here to do a public service announcement. About a year and a half ago, we were notified as a country that we had invasive hammerhead worms, which are 8 to 12 inches long. They look like little arrows. The other day, my neighbor said, "Look what I've got. What is it?" It was a hammerhead. And I want to tell you, if you see them, don't chop them up because they regenerate. You chop it up 3 times, you give us 3 new ones. Don't squash it because if there's a piece that can break off, it will regenerate and become a new one. It also contains a neurotoxin, like the pufferfish, which means if your cats get to playing with it, or your dogs play with it, or if your children say, "Look what I found," they're going to get very, very sick. The way to kill them, like a slug, you get a can of salt, go from the front to the back, back to the front. I don't care which way you go, but get it all, and it will shrivel up and die. But I couldn't believe it because my neighbor lives on Salisbury Avenue. It means it's here, and I wanted to give everybody who has pets, children, and themselves a heads up and get it out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Talbot. All right, have we received any written correspondence?
No correspondence.
Okay, very good. We will now move on to our consent agenda. And we placed items on the consent agenda at our pre-agenda meeting on Thursday. And so at this time, is there any need to pull any of the items from the consent agenda? And if not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I
Motion
move
to
to.
approve the consent agenda, please.
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Miller,
Second.
second by Ms. Sledge. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, all opposed? All right, and the consent agenda is approved. All right, the next item is to consider adopting Resolution 22-011, which is the intent to annex property. Attachment 3 will ask Mr. Blunt to come forward.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. It looked, according to your agenda, that you had a very short meeting tonight, so I created a few 50-slide presentations for you afterwards
Thank you.
to make sure we can stretch this out a little bit.
What a pound.
That's the wrong one. I need the other one. We'll get to this one later. The annexation that we're talking about is very self-explanatory and not a complex issue at all. What we're asking you to do tonight is adopt an intent to annex resolution that gets the process started. This quick slideshow will explain to you why we're annexing this property. And that's where it all started, Wilcox Bridge. Y'all know about this project as much as I do. I'm not going to go through the history of it. Matter of fact, I'm going to go through this amazingly fast. After the Wilcox Bridge was taken over by Davidson County, they decided to build a trailhead. And that trailhead is shown in that slide. Beautiful trailhead. I'm sure many of you have been out there to enjoy that. They also have plans for a 30-acre park. The trailhead is just down in the lower left-hand corner. The rest of it stretches up into the woods with trails in the parking area and bathrooms, etc. So pretty ambitious park there. And since Spencer's not to be outdone, we started planning our trailhead. And this is one of the early drawings of the master planning process to build a trailhead on the west side, southwest side of the Wilcox Bridge to match what Davidson County was doing on their side. And that's a part of the actual construction drawings. And a bid letting will be held on July 1st. Joe went out and raised a bunch of money for y'all. This is going to be a reality in the very near future. Beautiful trailhead project going on out there. This is an older drawing, and it's a little hard to see here, so I think you've got a hard copy in your hand. This is sort of a 50,000-foot view of both sides of the road, with the bridge between us. And all that green that's shown there is proposed to be parkland and recreational areas of one type or another, with Spencer working on one side and Davidson County on the other side. Along with this project is hopefully a redevelopment of the North Carolina Finishing Company property. That's shown in blue with the black streets drawn in is just a rough conceptual drawing of what could be a future business park on that property. And then what I'm told is rust colored that wraps around it is actually owned by Cube Hydro, and the yellow lines would be a trail system that would allow us recreation on our side. And this would just be the first and very rudimentary steps towards making that area into an amazing asset for this community. So to make it happen, back to the annexation. That yellow strip of property was once owned by North Carolina Department of Transportation. They transferred ownership to the town of Spencer for our plans to build a trailhead there on that property. It's a little over 1 acre. It was and still is in the zoning authority of Rowan County. It's not in the city limits of the town. It's not in our EPJ. So since we are going to build a park out there and expand our park ambitions to surrounding lands, it's only fitting that we actually make that a part of the city. And making it part of the city requires annexation. Along with the annexation will be, I'll make that a little bigger for you, but it goes through various steps. The intent to annex is what you're passing tonight. That sets a public hearing for your pre-agenda meeting in August. We'll hold that pre-agenda meeting, public hearing, and then at your regular meeting, you will be asked to pass a resolution to annex. At that time, you will have annexed the property into the municipal limits of the town. Along with that process, we need to apply one of our zoning classifications. The one that makes sense for this piece of property is our civic classification, CIV, so that we can build a park there. Along with that, on July 1st, you're going to receive bids on the park trailhead project. If those bids are within the budget, then you'll move ahead quickly with authorizing this. Joe will be able to come to me and get a zoning permit to build it instead of going to Rowan County, and things will move along. So this just brings you up to date on what we're doing as far as the annexation. Any questions?
Any questions from the board at this point?
I guess this is voluntary annexation.
You could call it that. It's actually a satellite annexation because it's not contiguous with our core area. So we had to follow a very specific set of steps to make it legal, but it's definitely voluntary.
Any other questions? Okay, so before you, you have resolution 22-011 in your packet. which provides a resolution of our intent to annex this particular property with the legal description of the property itself. Is there any discussion? And if not, is there a motion to adopt Resolution 22-01?
I move that we adopt the resolution as stated.
There's a motion by Mr. Morgan, second by Mr. Muhammad. All in favor? All right. All opposed? And that is approved. All right. Item 9 is to consider adopting Resolution 22-012, which is amending Spencer's Historic District standard as recommended by the Spencer Historic Preservation Committee.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
The item before you is a resolution that would accomplish a number of objectives. Not only would it update Spencer's historic standards, as I mentioned to you at your pre-agenda meeting last month, but it would also provide various authorizations to the HPC and staff to make some general improvements to Spencer's historic district process. I've got a lot of ground to cover in this presentation, so I'll try to keep it generally brief, but I did want to provide you enough information to make sure that you have what you need to make an informed decision tonight. And if you have any questions throughout this, feel free to stop me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have throughout my presentation. Going back to June 9th, that was when I made my preliminary presentation to you all about this project. I mentioned to you that traditionally Spencer's Historic Preservation Program has operated fairly well, but there has been several areas where we have needed to make some procedural improvements and tighten up some of our processes to make sure that we were meeting all of the applicable state and federal standards for operating a preservation program. I have two memoranda in my agenda materials, which you hopefully have had the opportunity to review over the past month. Just to provide a quick summary of the overall scope of this project, what this resolution would do is it would repeal the current 10 standards that the HPC uses to make decisions on applications for certificates of appropriateness. Any property owner in the historic district has to seek a permit from the town before they can do any major exterior change to the property. That's things like putting on a new roof, taking out windows, putting on a new addition, installing a new driveway, or even demolishing and building new residential and commercial structures in the historic district. The standards that the town currently has are very minimal standards. They were designed to be customer friendly, but as I said, it sort of shot us in the foot because the town does not have the regulating standards it needs to make evidence-based decisions based on adopted written standards in the context of quasi-judicial public evidentiary hearings. And so what the HPC has found is the need, especially with the new 160D state statute, to make sure that we're minimizing any legal exposure to the town and to make sure that we are crossing our T's and dotting our I's to make sure we have authoritative regulating standards that can survive judicial scrutiny. So again, what the resolution does, it repeals the 10 standards that the town has been using to make decisions on historic district permits and replaces them with 300 new standards that provide the essential clarity that the HPC needs to make decisions. And like I said last month, I know that 300 standards sounds like a lot, but I would encourage you to consider these standards are going to be no stricter than standards that you would find in other historic districts across North Carolina. They conform very closely to best practices in how to regulate decisions within historic districts. You'll find in communities like Durham, Salisbury, Charlotte, and Raleigh, they have anywhere between 200 and 400 standards. So us having 300 standards is pretty consistent with what you would find in other jurisdictions. Additionally, the new standards will be organized into very easy to read, customer friendly sections and chapters. So if you are an owner of a historic property and you're seeking a permit for a project, you really only have to reference a couple of standards to figure out what are the town's expectations for the treatment of your property. In no circumstance will you have to review all 300 standards for your permit. You just skip to the section that applies to your project, and reference what those standards are. So, in short, the update will clarify the town's expectations for the preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration of historic buildings in Spencer, including expectations for new residential and commercial construction and additions within the historic district. I want to emphasize that last part. The town currently does not have any adopted standards for new construction, which is very difficult, especially now when we're experiencing so much development. It's hard for the HPC to review the size, scale, architectural design, and other elements of a new house in the historic district when we don't have written standards to refer to. And so what this does is it eliminates that ambiguity and sets out very clearly what the town expects from new homes and buildings in the historic district. Additionally, this update will help ensure that Spencer meets the qualifications for joining the Certified Local Government Program, which is a program established by the 1966 National Historic Preservation Act. This is a goal that was identified by the HPC in their annual goals. Any town that operates a preservation program will eventually want to be certified through the State Historic Preservation Office. It offers not only special grants and funding for the town to improve its historic district, but it also provides free technical support and training from the state preservation staff. So, for example, in 2 decades from now, the planners and HPC staff working in the town will have access to free support and training from the state to help make sure that we're continually maintaining and improving our processes for regulating the historic district. So this is something that Spencer will certainly want to do, is explore joining that program. And then finally, the update will help ensure that new investment in Spencer, it'll help make sure that for property owners, developers, town staff, that the historic review process is much more clear, more transparent, and easier to navigate for everyone. So that's a general review of the scope of the project. Like I said, the June 1st memorandum that I provided to you last month goes into more depth. But I wanted to take the bulk of my presentation tonight to go into detail about the resolution that y'all are considering adopting. So this resolution includes a number of authorizations. Not only does it amend the 10 standards, but it also does the following. It authorizes the HPC to make minor amendments to the non-regulating sections contained in the standards manual to facilitate ongoing improvement to the accessibility and usefulness of the document. So basically what this means is once we get this new standards document adopted and published, the HPC has the authority to make minor improvements to how the document is organized, to put in figures, pictures, and diagrams, basically to help historic property owners navigate the process and plan their project. Again, these are the non-regulating sections of the document that are provided just to make it easier and more helpful for people. But the resolution also authorizes the HPC to make minor amendments to the actual regulating standards within these limitations. The HPC can only amend the regulating standards to clarify unclear terminology or sentence arrangement. The HPC cannot adopt any new regulations or expand the scope of existing regulations. So any new standards that the HPC would consider adopting would have to come back to the Board of Aldermen. The Aldermen are the final arbiter for what standards get adopted or not, but the HPC is basically seeking for administrative efficiency to make minor amendments to the standard if there are any sections which become unclear or we don't know how to enforce. And then additionally, the resolution authorizes the HPC to provide for staff review and approval of minor work projects as administrative decisions without requiring review by the HPC. So basically, the HPC would draft a classification chart showing which projects require HPC review, which means if you have a project that is a major work, you have to wait for the HPC meeting each month and go through the process of having a public hearing, and the HPC would make a decision on that. Those are for the largest projects which make major changes to historic properties or new construction and demolitions in the historic district. If a project gets categorized as a minor work project, then that would be reviewed by me at the staff level, and typically those are done anywhere between 1 and 3 days. Those are smaller projects that don't really have any major impact on the home. Our goal is to make more projects minor work to improve the efficiency, make sure that we're getting out approvals quickly for homeowners to not have to wait long for their project. And then this chart would also categorize routine maintenance, which does not require HPC review or staff approval at all. So in general, what this authorization does is allows the HPC to determine those projects which don't need to waste anyone's time. Basically, we can get those approvals done efficiently and quickly and provide those permits for property owners. Now, additionally, this next section, the resolution would also authorize the HPC to prevent the removal of healthy, mature trees within the historic district, provided that no regulation may be established to prevent the removal for public safety of any unhealthy, diseased, or severely damaged trees, or any other trees creating an unsafe or dangerous condition. The reason I want to dwell on this is because I would highly recommend in the future for the aldermen to consider developing either a canopy preservation policy or a tree ordinance that would actually clarify what the governing board's preference is for how trees are regulated in the historic district or across town. Right now, the HPC is the only local authority making decisions on the removal of trees. The preference is for any mature, healthy trees, those should be retained to conserve the historic canopy and the character of the district. However, in some cases, there may be cases where large, healthy trees have simply outgrown where they were planted, that there may be some threat posed to a historic structure. We saw when these last storms came through, there was at least one tree that took out the front of a house. And so, even though the HPC will continue to regulate the removal of trees, if that's what your preference is for them to continue to do, I think in the future there should be some general policy decision made by the town on how you want to regulate your tree count. Steve Blunt actually sent me a email this morning that the North Carolina legislature is actually presumably exploring removing local government's authority to regulate trees generally. But if and when that happens, I can't say. But for now, the HPC is requesting the authority to continue to regulate tree removal if you believe that's something that should be within their purview. And then finally, the resolution authorizes the HPC to continue to regulate paint color within the historic district within certain parameters. Specifically, the HPC may not require any one specific color scheme on any building, but may offer a range of color scheme recommendations to the applicant that are compatible with the architectural style of the building. So most communities with historic districts do regulate paint color to some extent. In most cases, unless there's a clear and compelling reason that there's a color scheme that's significant, we generally approve any color scheme that comes before us as long as it's not zebra stripes and polka dots. But in some cases, for example, potential landmark properties, there are cases where a more meaningful dialogue on the color scheme of the house is appropriate. And so what this authorization does is continue to allow the HPC to make decisions on color. So I know I've tried to cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time. Do you all have any questions at this point?
Does the board have questions?
Okay, so the tree regulations at this point are just for the historic district, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the paint issue of regulating the color of paint, will that specify a particular brand of paint to be used, or does
No.
it give you the range?
We do not specify any particular brand of paint. We do often bring up the Sherwin-Williams historic colors palette, but we are clear to specify that we're not favoring Sherwin-Williams above any other paint supplier, and that any color scheme that matches the general color proposal will be acceptable.
Other questions? I do have a question about the section 5 related to the trees. So, we've got a situation where we do have vacant lots that the town owns within our historic district that, for whatever reason, whether there used to be a house there or had to be torn down, that sort of thing. There are going to be situations where there are potentially mature trees on those lots, and we went through a pretty exhaustive effort to make sure that we made it where we could develop on those 50-foot lots. This would prevent that from happening.
Are you asking if it would prevent it, or?
Well, as I read it, it would prevent it from happening, unless we can prove that every single one of them is diseased and damaged.
I see what you're saying. So in the case of an undeveloped 50-foot lot, I think we would certainly treat that as a special circumstance. The idea here is to prevent the removal of healthy mature trees on developed lots that are already either commercial or single-family residential. If you think we need to revise the wording of Section 5 to specify that undeveloped lots may be graded and clear-cut as needed, we could certainly add in that language.
We just don't want us to lock ourselves into something that's going to prevent that sort of thing. What does the board think?
I agree. We basically shot ourselves in the foot last year when we had when we updated our codes and accidentally tossed the baby out with the bathwater when we removed the section that prevents parking in front and side yards except on prepared surfaces. I want to add to that, what if there's someone within the historic district that has a request to build, say, an outbuilding or a garage that would necessitate removing trees? Would that prevent them from doing that?
So these are good questions, and these are all why I think that the town should for some type of canopy and tree preservation policy generally. I think the intent of Section 5 is to make sure that if it's not necessary, that healthy mature trees be retained. That establishes the general policy of the town that within the historic district, trees that are healthy and mature shouldn't be arbitrarily removed. But what we can do is add provisions for lots that are currently undeveloped, that they can be developed and trees can be removed for those cases. But I think there should be a more broad-based conversation about the town's tree policy moving forward.
I agree, and I think the easy solution to this is simply to amend the wording in Section 5 to say that the Spencer Historic Preservation Commission is hereby authorized to prevent the unnecessary removal of healthy mature trees.
We can certainly add that terminology, and then
That gives a bit of flexibility.
Possibly after that, we could clarify what we mean by unnecessary as well, which would basically mean that we would just want to define what we mean by that, and I can certainly add in that language based on the conversation that we've had.
Yes, Ms. Slade.
Cal, I have one other question, and I think this is the proposed update, the 50-foot page thing. Okay. There's a section in here about cemeteries. Are we maintaining cemeteries?
So there is at least one historic cemetery within the town. It is not currently within the historic district, but it could potentially be eligible for a landmark at some point in the future. The reason we included a cemetery section would be to plan for the future of planning for Spencer's historic resources. I'm thinking back more than a year ago. I had a conversation with the owner of the cemetery, which was, I believe, an African American cemetery, and so there's at least some interest getting that cemetery designated with some type of special status. So we decided it would be important to include how the town would expect that cemetery to be treated moving forward if it came into the support program.
Is that the one that's across the street from where Hendricks is?
Yeah.
Okay, is there not another one that's kind of down under the bridge between?
There's one
Mary
between the old Spencer Steel Supply Building and the bridge or the water tank, the old water tank there. It's right off the tracks. Yeah, I mean, that thing has been there for a long, long time.
And if you look at the language in that section, it's basically about making sure that you're using appropriate methods to clean and preserve headstones, making sure you're not doing any unnecessary ground disturbance, things like that, which is common sense. But we thought it would make sense to include that section, given the fact that we do have those.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. Get back to trees real fast. If we have trees that is in city property, it's owned by the city, and it's in the historic area, does the city have the right, if the trees are in the way for safety and everything, does the city have the right of way to decide the fate of those trees, or does it have to go back to this group?
So any proposal to remove a tree, even if it's from the town itself, they would be the applicant for a COA, and they would come to the HPC for a decision. You mentioned that the trees you were talking about, hypothetically, were trees that obscured or obstructed some type of...
It causes some damage to some flags and stuff.
Yeah. Anything like that would come to the HPC, and they would make a decision based on the standards that they have adopted. The town is subject to the same permitting standards as any private property owner when it comes to changes to the historic district.
But I want to know who has jurisdiction. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Harris.
I did want to just quickly wrap up, and I know I'm just repeating what I already said in my memo, and I think I mentioned this last month, but from a procedural and administrative standpoint, the new standards are essential to ensure that the town is in compliance with applicable state law regarding the enforceability of historic district regulations. But from a broader perspective, the value of historic preservation as an economic development tool is very clear. Well-maintained historic districts in smaller towns and cities are an extremely desirable destination for families who are relocating from larger cities. Stronger standards for the treatment of historic properties, as well as enforcement of those standards, can play a vital role in improving the quality of life across Spencer. Well-maintained historic districts can improve pride of ownership and pride of place, stimulating additional reinvestment in properties in a virtuous cycle. To succeed, Spencer must leverage its limited resources effectively. Spencer's historic resources are some of our most important resources, and this project helped us move toward taking advantage of their value. The only last thing I'll say is that I just want to commend the HPC for their diligent work on this project. It has taken many special meetings over many months for the HPC to arrive to the proposed document that you've been reviewing over the last month. Just taking a step back, this is going to be a major improvement to how Spencer's Historic District operates. Not only from an administrative standpoint, in terms of staff's ability to make educated decisions on permits and providing guidance to property owners, but also it allows property owners to plan their projects without requiring an extended back and forth between the town on what the town's expectations are. The main problem with our current regulatory program when it comes to the historic district is vague and ambiguous standards. And so this, even though it expands the number of standards that apply in the historic district, it provides that essential and important clarity to everyone about what we expect out of our historic property. And I just want to again commend the HPC. I know it's been a hard project. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
All right, thank you. And I'll echo that. We really have a lot of appreciation for all the time that went in. Ms. Talbot, thank you for your leadership and the board, and also Kyle for all the work that you put into it. You know, it was a labor of love, so thank you. All right, any questions at this point?
I'd like to make a comment real fast.
Yes.
Again, I appreciate what y'all done, and Kyle and y'all in the historic group. And I know what you're trying to do as far as keep your regulations as tight as possible. But I think at the same time, I hope your board decides to be a lenient and at least work with different homeowners as far as that goes, because in the past, I know some groups have been very, very strict, and I don't want that to happen. And I know Kyle is pretty easy to work with, and I don't think your group is, but I think you should be able to work with these groups.
What Steve is saying is I am. No, that's not true. One of the things is by having straightforward standards, one, it removes the ambiguity not just from the HPC members in interpretation, but it also prevents us from doing the back and forth. Standards are standards, but we can, because we're a committee, we can make appropriate exceptions to the standards where it's necessary, where it's not black and white. It's about building a neighborhood and a community that we're proud of, and we have to be good partners.
That's
and
good.
We work real hard to do
That's
that.
what I'm trying to express, because we want to be people friendly and have people build in these areas as far as that goes. And I know there's certain areas, certain cities that are very, very strict, and I don't want that to happen.
No, this is a community effort. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to build something that somebody can go and look at and say, oh, this is what I need to do to make my house the house that everybody in the neighborhood wants to be like. And if you have a little struggle, we're more than glad to partner and work with you. But we're not willing to suspend the standards, because then we lose that leverage as a certified local government opportunity. But yeah, we're on your side.
Good.
So are we going to put this resolution to a vote?
If
with
there
the
is a
with
motion
the
and a
amend-
second.
With the amended section 5?
If you'd like to make a motion, absolutely.
All right, would like to propose that we approve resolution 22-012, amending Spencer's historic district standards with the addition of the word unnecessary removal in section 5.
All right, so
In
there's
that wording.
motion by Mr. Morgan,
Second.
by Mr. Miller. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right. All opposed? All right, that is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Thanks for all your work.
Thanks for all the hard work, and thanks to the historic preservation.
Very good. All right, Mr. Morgan, we're at item 10, and I believe you will be presenting a request for funding for a movie night series.
Again, this is continuing my efforts to bring more events to our community that are family oriented. You have before you a sheet of paper request for funding, and I'll just read it, if that's okay. On behalf of the citizens of Spencer, I'm requesting that funding be allocated and applied towards the expenses for this year's movie nights in Spencer. These events will take place over a 3-month period, the evenings of Saturday, August 13th, Saturday, September 10th, and Saturday, October the 8th. The events will take place at the 8th Street Ballpark and will be hosted by volunteers from the Spencer J.C. There is money still available in the town's events budget, to my recollection, roughly $2,000 that has been set aside specifically for events like this, and I would therefore like to make this formal request. However, that basically guts that line item, and more money will be needed to cover the cost, which you have achieved. And Andrew, I don't think you have one, but you missed it. I apologize. Just bear with me just a second. I'll give you a copy of it. Right back to you. More money will be needed to cover the cost. I am also requesting that $2,800 be allocated from the contingency funds line item to help cover the additional costs involved. I have provided each of you with an overall information sheet that provides a breakdown of the costs involved. The only revision is the cost of the porta-johns, as they will not be needed because of the restroom facilities already located at the ballpark. It is my fervent hope that these events, held over a 3-month period late this summer and into the early fall, will provide another way for our community to come together, reconnect, and enjoy evenings under the stars with family and friends. I hope all of you can join me on these evenings, and thank you for your consideration, support, and believing in Spencer.
All right, thank you, Mr. Morgan. Are there questions from the board?
I got a question.
Yes.
Now, as a life member of Spencer JC's, I'm really torn between this, but I have a question relating to these 3 nights. Are we committing to 3 nights, even if, say for the first night, it doesn't, August 13th looks like it's going to be a very hot night as far as that goes, and I question whether, I want to help the community, okay? Don't get me wrong, but are we committing to those 3 dates, or are we just doing one at a time, or how are we doing?
It's for those 3 dates.
3 dates.
If there's a rain out, this is going to play, from what I understand, the JCs are going to have members of the audience sit in the outfield, face the grandstand, put the screen there, basically where home plate is. He's getting, Lauren West is heading up this and is going to get with Joel Taylor in regards to how to get it properly laid out. This is the list that you see has the equipment, the movie rental, the licensing, all the costs. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit less because they won't need the porta-john. And if there are rainouts for these 3 dates, then it will apply to what we do next. In other words, they will guarantee a rescheduling at no additional charge. That's 1 year from the schedule.
All right, other questions?
As host, what would JC's be doing?
They will be providing concessions and helping run the equipment.
Concession money will go to the Spencer JC?
Yes.
And what do they use their funds for?
They try to pump it back into the community, but the JCs took a big hit several years ago. So they're one of the few JC groups that are still left here in North Carolina. Their funding suddenly went away, and I can talk to you about that later if you would like. But they are just now getting on their feet again and trying to generate interest in membership, as well as doing things for the community.
One of the things they also do, they do an annual distinguished service banquet to recognize leadership in all areas, both adults and students for service throughout the community. So they've done that past several years.
I've known of the JCs, but I've never really known what they did.
Yeah, they try to put everything back into the community, which is really what it should be for. And, I'm not speaking against the JCs. Naturally, I'm all for the JCs, and I'm all for helping the community bonding. And I think it's a good idea. I just want to be careful. I hope this money is spent wisely as far as that we have enough people to make it worthwhile. And you don't know till you try. So,
It's the same way with our cruising.
I understand.
We don't know who else going to show up. And I thought this would be a good way to try to do something.
What worries me is August the 13th because, like I said, it's going to be a hot season. And no offense, the church over here, our Methodist church, have been trying to get kids to come out for meals and everything. Kids don't want to get out; too hot, and they just stay home and in the air conditioning. Like I said, I'm supportive of this, but I got some questions, but I'll vote for it.
Well, I can go back to them and see if they would be open to, rescheduling, and maybe start in September, go through.
That throws it back into November, and that's too cold.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Francis.
Well, I just wanted to point out that perhaps, the question for the board at this point is about the sponsorship request. In terms of schedules, and that's something that staff would handle with the permit process. And, I don't know if you're being asked to approve a schedule per se at this time. And that's, that the JCs would need to fill out our event permit, and we would proceed, at that point. So there's still time to fine tune the schedule.
Can I just ask one clarification? You said the screen would be at the home plate, and the audience would be out on the field. Is that correct? They bring their own chairs and stuff. Is that going to do any damage to the field and stuff? Because okay.
They thought about seating everybody in the stand early on, but with the backdrop and the fencing and everything, it would be difficult to see through that. So that's why they wanted to flop it around.
Okay.
I think I read also that you've got to be within 100 feet of a electrical service as far as presenting that. Joel, I'm going to ask you a question. If we do that projector out there, like you're saying, is there a receptacle within 100 feet of that? Okay.
Where the center gate is.
Yeah.
And that panel box will be open, and I believe there's receptacles in that box.
Just as long as I don't want to go to that running too thick a line.
Right. And if it isn't, there's plenty of open panels there. We can get some receptacles there. That's not a problem.
Okay. You see any problem with it at all?
Oh, I do not.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional security? Do we need additional security or anything?
Most likely, any event like that, we would want to have some extra police involved. If that's part of, and what I would say part of what the request for this sponsorship really should be, not just funding but in-kind services. That way we can handle those needs as well.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the funding for this movie night.
Okay. And the amount that's being asked for is 4,800 total?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so there is a motion by Mr. Miller. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a second.
Who did you?
I don't know.
Okay. So who's the second?
Mr. Howe.
Me.
Okay.
All right. Any further discussion on that? I guess I do have one question related to budget impacts. Are we able to, I know we have money within the events budget to handle part of that and the rest contingency. The staff feel comfortable in being able to support that.
In terms of
the 4,800.
Yeah, in terms of a budget, yes. So the $2,000 is was available, programmed into the budget. So that would use that amount that was available. The contingency would cover the rest, and if something else came along, it would need to involve, another funding source. But for this, we believe if you were to approve that, and we would likely come back to you with a budget amendment to appropriate the contingency, but this gives us the direction.
All right. Any other questions or discussion? All right. There's a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor? All right. All opposed? All right. And that is approved. Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you.
All right. Item 11 is to consider authorizing the mayor to execute a corrective non-warranty deed with Jennifer Dawn Hatley Wholesaler for property located at 4th Street, lots 2 and 3. And with that, Mr. Dees.
Mayor and board, I was contacted by a lady who claimed that she owned a lot here in town, but that she had tried to sell it, and the people doing the title work discovered that the town of Spencer still owned the lot, even though this lady's mother and father had paid the taxes for as long as anyone could remember. I went in and searched, and I couldn't find any deed from the town. I found the deed into the town for this lot. It's actually 2 lots, but never found a deed from the town to the people who owned it. They owned several lots in this area at one time, and then sold them over time. I did confirm with the tax office that at least for the last 12 years that we can identify the actual payor of the payments, that it was this family that paid taxes for the last 12 years, and their records showed that for at least 20 years taxes have been paid. So it wasn't treated as a municipal lot that was exempt from tax. We've been collecting taxes from these lots for as long as we know. I suggested she get a local attorney, Lucinda Fraley, to confirm her interest in the property, because both her parents are now deceased. And so I worked with Lucinda, and Lucinda confirmed that the father died and left everything to the mom died and left everything to the daughter. So there doesn't appear to be any sort of title conflict with regard to who would own it at this point. Everything that we know kind of sets up that the town sold these lots to this person 40 or 50 or more years ago. We know that for the last 20 years, somebody's been paying taxes. For the last 12, it was this family. And so my suggestion is that it was being actively marketed for redevelopment. These are vacant lots. That it would be in the town's best interest to transfer this as a corrective action to reflect what we probably should have done decades ago, but to also quiet the title to her lot so that she can sell those for development. You do have people that are buying and building right now, and I can't remember the exact address.
I know exactly where it was. Our daddy used to have a garden on those lots.
Yeah.
And so
there was so this lady mentioned there was this huge garden in there that her daddy called, the community garden or the community farm or something. And the owner is connected to Spencer.
Oh,
And so very, very polite and respectful. She just needed our help, and I think that this was good work and would be good for the town to do, and we can free this up for her to get it in the hands of someone who might develop it for you. And so my recommendation is that we approve and authorize the mayor to sign a non-warranty deed, which means we're not giving any warranties as to any title or condition of title. We're conveying only what we think we might have. But it's a non-warranty deed, and to approve the deed and authorize the mayor to sign it, and we can let her get it out on the market.
All right. Are there questions from the board? All right. Hearing none. Mr. Dees, thank you very much for working through that. All right. And so we will entertain a motion to execute the corrective non-warranty deed.
I'll make a motion we do.
All right, there's a motion by Mr. Miller, second by Mr. Muhammad. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, all opposed? And that is approved. And we are now at our departmental reports. We'll ask Mr. Blunt to come up for the planning department.
Mayor, members of the board, before I delve into the planning department report, if I can take just a 2-second commentary. Alderman Miller asked the question about the HPC
Time's up.
standards and whether the board would be enforcing things more strictly or less strictly, more leniently. And really the way to look at it is they're adopting objective standards instead of having to make every decision based on subjective issue. And that means that property owners are going to have a document they can look at, and they will know coming in the door whether they're going to get something approved or not approved, because the HPC's hands will be tied to that document. They have to make decisions based on the standards that they have adopted. So it really should be better for property owners.
Sure,
Just wanted to point that out. Also, in the development ordinance, there is a landscaping section, and within that landscaping section, there is a tree preservation section. Quite honestly, I don't know the details of it, so I don't want to try to present it to you, but there is some language in our current ordinance that tries to protect trees on large developments, and I'll try to delve into that and give you more details in the future. Each month, what I tell you is, I can wake up my pet guy and get my car back on.
What's the likelihood that that legislation is going to go through in Raleigh where they're taking away those?
It got shuttled into committee, so obviously it
No.
wasn't going to be taken care of during the short session, but I would be watching it during the long session when it comes up to see if they bring it back up.
Yeah, I knew that was there. And
There was some support. Anytime towns get too far on one side or the other of trying to enforce things, developers and homeowners associations and other people push back. And the protection of trees maybe got pushed a little too far. If you remember back years ago, protection of billboards, actually the control of billboards got pushed one way too far, and the industry pushed back, and sometimes that has real negative effect. Each month I come before you and say my department report's in your package, take a look at it, let me know if you have any questions. You never have any questions, and surprisingly to me, somebody actually reads those reports. So at your last meeting I was asked, because somewhere buried deep in my report was a comment about an environmental arts center. And the question was, what environmental arts center? So I wanted to show you, there it is. I know it's hard to believe, but that is the future site of the Environmental Arts Center. It's the Kudzu Gully that everybody loves down on South Salisbury Avenue. Or maybe that's what it looks like. Beautiful site with kudzu trying to pull those trees down. It's a little hard to believe with the kudzu growing that gully is 30 feet deep, because the kudzu grows so high that it doesn't look anywhere near that deep. There's the old radiator shop that's for sale now. Not very pretty, not a very welcoming sight to our community. And as I explained to Alderman Miller when he taught me on this item in my department report, this idea of a center on that property came from the original planning document for Spencer Woods, or the Standback Forest. It was called My Woods, a Vision for Spencer Woods, done back in 2012. If you dig through that actual plan, I've got it with me. I actually served on that committee. That was my first involvement officially with the town of Spencer. You're all aware of the Spencer Woods. The circle on the lower end is the original 42-acre tract that includes this piece of property we're talking about. We've recently had 50 acres donated by one of our town's wonderful families. It will become a part of Spencer Woods. Some of the trails have already been run up through there. We're in the works of trying to develop a trailhead on 7th Street. But according to the original plan, we were supposed to do something with that front property. And I'll try to identify it a little more before I show you what the original plan showed to be there. Sort of that oval that goes around the area sort of circles the property that's in question. It is the Kudzu Gully. There's a private piece of property on the front right of it that is in ownership by, surprisingly enough, a billboard company out of Lenore. They got it in a sales package when they bought a bunch of land. I've already talked to them about that. And then, of course, the old radiator repair facility has been cleaned out by an LLC, and I think is being marketed as a piece of property for sale. It's a little hard to see this, and that's why I printed out an actual drawing for you to see in more clarity. As I mentioned, the gully, the street level is 722 feet above sea level. It drops 30 feet the back of the property where the creek runs out of the back of that piece of parcel there that I'm showing. There is a peninsula of land, if you want to call it that, that actually retains the 722-foot elevation all the way back into the middle of the property to the left-hand side a little bit. This means there's a flat piece of property back there that could be built upon fairly easily, and a road could be run in to get to that. This is what the old plan showed. And I pulled out some of the text from what was in that plan. They called it the Center for the Urban Forest at that time. I had a hard time getting my mind wrapped around what that meant, so I started playing with names to try to make it a little more attractive. Sometimes if you put new hubcaps on a used car, you can sell it easier, and that's maybe what I'm trying to do with this process. But these two slides, and you've got hard copies of it, show what the original plan was, and it was really a loose vision of what it might be at some point in the future. They didn't try to tie it down to an exact plan, but it does show how structures could be built on the frontage, how a trail system could be inserted in there to make this a very attractive trailhead to tie into the Spencer Woods property, and also to become an asset to the community as far as other uses for that building. At some point, Alderman Morgan had mentioned a community center, so I started thinking this might be a good place for that community center. Again, this drawing, if you can read the small print, if not, I've got some other copies of it I can give you. But it tells some of the possible uses and the benefits of developing this property. There's an old saying about a drum major, the guy that leads the band, when he gets too far of the band in front of the band, what is he? He's just a guy with a funny hat and a stick. I didn't want to become that, so that's why I'm here tonight. Don't want to get too far ahead of our elected officials as far as some of the things we're looking at. That's my sketch. I'm obviously not as good an artist as those folks that drew the original plan, but in some of the thought process that staff has gone through, this would be one possibility of how to develop the property. The uses of the building itself are up in the air, and I'm looking for lots of options because I think it would be a multi-use building that could be used for various things in the community. If we go back to the original front slide, and I won't flip back through them, down at the bottom of that front slide on your hard copies is the Bob Timberlake Environmental Arts and Wellness Center. That's my wife's side. So had to get that one in. So just wanted to let you know, since Alderman Miller caught me inserting things into the activities report, that this is what that activity was. I think it was actually a notation that I'd had a phone conversation with property owners for that piece of private property. Other things are going on with this, and we'll keep you posted as we move forward.
My understanding is Mr. Blunt and Mr. Morris have, been working on this kind of in the background, and I think you have gotten some pretty big name support for the concept. So that's just to put that out there.
There were 12 more slides on this presentation, but I stopped before I gave away too many things.
Thank you for condensing.
This is the teaser.
Lots of good things out there. So if you have anybody ask you about that, that's what we're shooting for.
Thank you, Mr. Blood.
If you have any ideas, please let me know, and we'll start folding it into that presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Sir.
The Timberlake's like Chatola a lot.
Surprisingly, when I talked to them,
Oh, wow. All right. Mr. Harris, anything from your end on planning?
I will provide a brief update on something that has been a recurring theme in my staff reports over the last year, is the CDBG NR grant. So I think the last update that I gave to y'all is that we received approval for a 14-month extension to our timeline, which pushes the final completion of that grant out to February 2025. but actually we're ready to get started fairly soon. Next month, we're going to bring to y'all a package of documents that I'm going to give you a presentation about, I think, 6 or 7 plans that the town will need to adopt in order to be eligible to proceed with CDBG grant. The very brief overview of that is, as part of the 1960s Great Society program, there are a number of federal civil rights and fair housing, equal employment requirements that the town has been able to, I mean, we're meeting our minimal compliance, but because we're now receiving a lot more influx of state and federal funds with strings attached, we're now required to evaluate what we're doing in the areas of fair housing, making sure we're providing economic benefit to local low and very low income people, making sure we're providing opportunities for example, Spanish speaking populations to access information about our program. So within the next month, we're going to be proposing to y'all adoption of various documents to make sure that we're in compliance with these federal fair housing and civil rights acts. It's nothing overly intrusive, if that's the right word. Basically, we're going to do what we have to do to meet the minimum standards to receive these funds, and those documents are due to the NC Department of Commerce Compliance Office on September 10th. And so what I've done as of today, I've developed drafts of a fair housing plan, an equal employment plan, a language access plan, and a Section 3 local economic benefit plan that we are internally still reviewing. We will also need to do some additional environmental studies and some evaluations around the town's procurement policies to make sure that we meet all of those standards. But those are just to say that that planning is now well underway, and you will have a package for consideration in August. Okay. Do you have any questions about CDBG?
Would some of the documentation in our employee manual satisfy some of those requirements?
Yes. A lot of the policies the town currently has meets the requirements, but there are several areas where we have to clarify the town's policies and approach and what we're doing to affirmatively further the policies of the Civil Rights Act. Things like that. So those are areas where we will have to make some adjustments. And like I said, the reason we're all having to do this now is because Spencer is such a small municipality. In the past, we maybe haven't been eligible for as much federal and state funding that we're now eligible for. And so it's not that we've been skirting around these federal policies and acts. It's just that it's never been a contingent requirement for receiving the funds, but now it is. So now we have to come into compliance with federal.
I'd like to see us do more than just the minimum.
Mr. Miller?
Changing subjects real fast. I know this is under your area. Can you give an up-to-date report on how these grants, Duke Power grants, and the Spencer grants that we awarded to different merchants in the community, how are they coming about? How are they developing?
So as of today, we have received completed contracts for all of the projects, and we've gotten purchase orders through our finance department to encumber those funds. None of the projects have been completed in the sense that we've not gotten any requests for reimbursement yet. But I am aware of several projects that have been completed. We just haven't received the reimbursement request yet. All of those recipients have until the end of this year to complete their project. So no one is behind on their timelines, but no payments have been made as of today. I do know, for example, Pinocchio's has made major improvements to their building already, repainting, new planter boxes, so they will soon be eligible for reimbursement once they get their ducks in a row.
Yeah. Just keep us informed on that, because I really want to make sure we use that.
Yeah, I think it'd be great if, as those projects kind of wrap up, if perhaps you could just put a short presentation together to provide to the board, just so we can see we can walk and see some of these that have been completed, but just a quick update on the progress of some.
That's good.
I had the opportunity to speak with one of the grant recipients and talk with them about their plans, and they were excited about it and told me what they were planning to do and where they were headed with it. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say about that is, obviously, once we get the program up and running and we award the grants, there is the expectation, well, now that they have the award, once get it done. But a lot of these people, it does take them time to plan their project and complete them. So everyone is still on track. It is just taking a little bit longer to get those funds issued. But I have every expectation that we'll spend all the money that was encumbered.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Osborne, code enforcement.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, board members.
Good evening.
You have my report. I want to kind of go over a couple of the highlights I had in there in reference to the public information for bamboo control. That was specifically for the 600 block of 3rd Street and 2nd Street, excuse me. And they have a giant bamboo, literally giant bamboo issue down there. So I called all the neighbors in to discuss what they can do to try and control the bamboo and options that they had outside of just general cutting it down and spraying it. So it's something I conducted on the 22nd. Also on the 28th, I had a hearing about 119 5th Street with the old Lyric Theater with the owner. Spoke to the owner about possibly getting me requesting engineer reports by the end of this month for the structural stability of those walls. Many people, I don't know if y'all are aware, but there's actually growth coming through those walls, and every time they're cut, I'm concerned about the stability of those walls being pushed by growth. So I'm highly encouraged her to get in what I need by the end of the month for that. So I'm hoping to see some reports on that. Hopefully good news. And then I want to move on to a couple other things and I have some questions about that.
What the growth is on what side of the growth?
In the alleyway beside the music school, down the alleyway, there's growth coming through the wall. So that's
Ivy or what is it?
It's some kind of trees.
Trees?
It's a tree. And it's also in the back corner on the back side that you can't see. It's 20 feet tall, and it also has growth on the other side as well.
Did she just cut them as far as they go, or what? Did she want to
You get the historic preservation tree police.
Oh my gosh. No, I didn't say that, he did.
Well, they actually been cutting that growth. They've actually been cutting it, but my concern as it regrows, it's growing in different directions and puts different pressure on the walls and maybe compromise the stability of the wall. So that's my concern. So I've requested that she provides.
Is she doing anything in that building as far as that goes? Well, I've heard some grand plans in that building, but I haven't seen anything going on.
Not that I'm aware of, but that was part of my encouragement is to try and get this part done so we can look forward on the walls. I don't want to have to demolish this building if we don't have to.
I wouldn't do that either, because that's got a movie theater at the back. It's very historic.
And I will say there's a covenant with NC preservation with her as well. So she's got deadlines that she's got to meet for them, along with our own deadlines. And so she's struggling to meet them, we say.
Okay, thank you.
What does she need?
Well, she was required to repair the holes in the roof, preventing further deterioration.
No, I mean, what does she need to be able to get it done?
Well, she's just got to put money and some people to it, primarily. Right now, she's got to get a structural engineer to make sure the walls can support anybody on the roof. The roof is deteriorated to the point where you can't even get on there to do anything. So it's kind of starting from the ground up to get to the point where we find out whether it's going to be salvageable. I'm not sure if that's where we're at right now until I find out this report whether it's safe or not to go forward. But I'm very excited to actually get this complete if we can get it moving forward. It'd be a big boost for the town. Any other questions from those?
Not on that.
Okay. So there was a few properties up on the Sowers Ferry Road that I'd like to bring up, and 101 Sowers Ferry, 104 and 1112 Elizabeth. The 104 spout, those particular properties, Chief File and myself all went around and spoke to every property owner and talked about the violations that we saw on those particular properties. At 104 Sowers Ferry, they have complied with all our requests to the best of my knowledge as of right now. I re-inspected it yesterday, and they cleaned up everything that we've asked them to do to the best of my knowledge without going on the property. 101 Sowers Ferry, I issued a notice of violation for them today. They got 5 days to maintain that, actually comply rather. And for the 111 Elizabeth, that's actually a non-conforming use issue. They're attempting to fix up the house on the property on the lot so it can be occupied. And that particular lot is zoned C29, which is commercial use. So that would be a non-conforming use property. So I've also hand-delivered that notice of violation to the property owner this afternoon in reference on how to maintain that particular issue. As per Blunt's recommendation that they subdivide that lot if they want to continue, and then submit a request to rezone that property. And then from there, go through the rest of the codes to screen and buffer that property from the residential property, which has the trailers that are actually on that property. That's it right now.
How long has it been since that house was occupied?
I'm not sure. I've never seen anybody occupy that property.
It was their mother's home. And I thought she lived there until not too long ago.
Right now, she's living at 101 Sowers Ferry, and the last I heard, she just went in the hospital late last week. So, but they put a new roof on it, and they put some money into renovating the inside of it. So I've asked him to stop doing that right now until he decides what he wants to do, and directed him to Mr. Blunt for further guidance on how to move forward.
Are there other questions from the board?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This is one of the properties that has really bothered me for a long, long time. And I can say for a fact that more of you would probably be interested should this property be next door to you. Whether it's Steve Blunt up on Pickett Avenue or Jonathan on Beauregard. But there are more tractor trailers parked in that backyard between the 11112 Elizabeth Avenue and their business than they're parked over at Bill's truck stop. There are at least a dozen or more that have been put in there and just left under the radar. And I know that there's a problem with grandfather. Okay. My comment to that was, what if someone had drug a container ship up from the Atlantic Ocean and parked it in their backyard? And used it for storage? Okay. Would our codes affect them removing that? I mean, what's it going to take for us? I mean, if we put so much emphasis on high grass and weeds in someone's yard, or vegetation, their backyard covered by vegetation, I mean, all you have to do is get in your vehicle and drive there and just look. Well, that's what I've had to look at for over 20-some years, and even longer than that.
So I'm going to ask a question that might allow our board to address this particular concern. Is there the ability for the board to consider an ordinance that would restrict tractor trailers from being parked for more than a set amount of time, that would eliminate this parking these trailers for extended periods of time?
There are ways to take care of existing uses instead of using trailers and storage units, let me talk about billboards. When billboards were unpopular and local governments decided to do away with them, what they had to do was amortize over time. They had to figure out what the value of the billboard was and say, okay, you can keep it for 10 years. At the end of 10 years, you've recouped your cost and your profit. Into 10 years, take it down, and we don't owe you a penny. And they were trying to avoid what's called the takings laws. If you take something of mine that's worth money, or if you restrict the use of my property and it costs me money, then I can sue the town. The town has to pay me for the takings that you've taken away my right to use. To use the same approach for the storage issue, let's take it even farther. The guy that pulled the container ship up into his backyard 20 years ago, if our ordinance allowed container ships to be in the backyard 20 years ago, and he put it there, we have a hard time getting rid of it. You call it grandfathering. It's a legal non-conforming use by the planning ordinance language. The statutes allow us to say you can't expand it, you can't replace it if it's damaged more than 50%. There are a few other lines of text in there that tell you how you can handle it, but as long as it stays in use, and there's another one of them, constant use, then he can continue to use that as long as he wants to. The property where Rapers is and the trailers are behind it is zone C29. The house that he's trying to restore is on that property. Residential housing is not allowed on C29. So for him, since it was out of use for a period of time, then we can say you can't use it for residential unless you subdivide it, cut it out of that C29 property, and get it rezoned residential. When they do that, they also have to address issues on the original C29 plot of land. And that kicks it back into enforcement of our current development ordinance, which says outdoor storage on C29 has to be buffered and screened. So if we can convince him to do the rezoning, we can also require him to do the screening. Our ordinance at this time does not specify whether they can use trailers for outdoor storage in the C29 classification. To answer your question specifically, can we pass an ordinance next month that says you can't use trailers in C29 and then tell him to get his trailers out of there? We would probably have to go through the amortization process to ensure that we're not doing a takings. It's a complicated process. Our attorney would have to help with that one.
So irrespective of the current issue, I mean, what I've heard from our board is it's an issue that we have with our code that allows it right now that we probably don't want our code to continue to allow.
Well, you have
So
to stop
that
and
needs
think,
to
do you
be-
want to allow outdoor storage in C29? And I would argue that you probably do. But in C29, what you also want to do is protect residential properties from the visual impact of outdoor storage. So you would want buffering and screening around that storage. You've already got
Proper
that.
storage is not the problem. It's utilizing things that weren't meant for storage. That's the problem. And, you know, again, we're dealing with the sins of our fathers again, okay? Because this thing has been allowed to slide for not just a couple of years, but for decades, okay? And I want some teeth put into our codes that prevents people from utilizing or using structures that are not deemed storage buildings to store their junk or whatever their valuables or anything else.
We can take care of that next month. We'll be glad
Somebody
to.
could, you know, I could haul a 53-foot trailer into my backyard and use it for storage. And, you know, there's nothing to say
That's
that
not true.
I can't
Yes.
do it.
Yes, there is. That's the problem. There are regulations. There are more regulations for outdoor storage on residential properties than there are for commercial properties, because commercial properties need outdoor storage. The swing transport? I mean, go up and count the number of trailers out there.
Right.
If we tomorrow outlawed storage trailers being used for storage, then we'd have to put them out of business.
The problem, though, is swing transport. That's truly continuous use. I think, and this is where the definition of continuous use, I think what Mr. Morgan is indicating is those are not in continuous use because they're a mobile storage unit that is no longer mobile.
Right.
And I think that's part of the issue. I would ask, I guess for the sake of time tonight, if staff would take that back over the course of the next month, work on some suggested revisions to our ordinance that is going to help clarify the commercial district storage, because I think you're right, we do want to continue to allow outdoor storage, but there's got to be some way to address future issues that might occur like that. And then I would also ask staff, and I know you're already working on it, collectively to get together and figure out what the solution to this trailer issue is. It needs to be resolved.
Let me throw you another thought process, and then we'll bring you back all the information we can find on it. There's a whole totally separate statute that allows a board, an elected board, to declare an individual property a nuisance. The statute was designed decades ago to take care of abandoned swimming pools, and it allows the board to designate the property as a nuisance, to explain why it's a nuisance, and then to take action to clean it up and bill the property owner for that action. Your attorney's probably clamping down at this point.
We've just done it. We just did it. James, where's James?
He's right behind you.
Yeah, he's hiding behind me, which is obviously.
Well, we just did that for what's his name, David, Mr. Dovey. So we just went through that process to declare his property a nuisance. So I mean, they're familiar with it. We just
It's a highly individualized process, and you have to have a legitimate reason to declare it a nuisance. As I said, the original statute had to do with abandoned swimming pools. The pools sat there with stagnant water, had mosquitoes being created, snakes, rats. It then got expanded into abandoned properties that had the same kind of situation. It's one of the few ordinances, nuisance types ordinances, that we can actually act on in our ETJ. It gives us authority to reach out into the ETJ to do so. That's why I'm familiar with it. But it takes an individual property, focuses in on what the problem is. You as a board get to vote to say, yes, we want to do this. And then staff takes legal action to proceed from there. I think James has been trying to work with the property owner to encourage him to clean it up. This latest step is a procedural step. Since he wants to use the house for residential, it's sort of, we'll help you use it for residential, but you're going to have to screen this other property in return. If he's not willing to do anything at all, then we're back to, we can stop him from using the residential property. That's probably a minor inconvenience. The screening question may come back to you having to declare it a nuisance. But we'll be glad to come back with some suggestions at the next meeting.
Thank you.
But,
Mr. Miller?
One clarification, James. I appreciate everything you do. How do we stand as far as the ordinance about parking in yards? When does that go into effect as far as that goes?
After talking to Mr. Blunt, apparently the educational portion has been complete with the newsletters.
Yep.
And I've been going around dropping off more information for individual people that I've seen violating those.
Yeah.
And so as of right now, I guess the enforcement period is started. So
It has started yet.
So
as far as
I know we talked previously that the plan was there would be the educational period to notify people. And then following that, we talked about a 30-day window where when you saw violations, that we would actually put basically what amounts to be a warning, but basically putting notification on their vehicle.
and that's where I'm at right now. I have not.
And so when is the end of that 30-day period?
I guess we could. When was the newsletter went out? Last week. So I guess within next 3 weeks.
So they arrived in late June. So this month of July is basically the education period, and by August it would be
enforcement
moving into that. Yeah.
we'll just say August 1, we'll move forward with the enforcement.
I just want to be sure that we're all clear on when that, what the schedule is. So that when we get an update next month, that we'll know that it's being enforced. Because I know our board's gonna want to start to see results from that.
And there's only one other, unless there's any more questions about that first step, I'd like to move on just to one more piece of property, probably won't take long. The finishing company has been leased out to, basically it is Duke Energy for Piedmont Natural Gas project in the area, and they're using it as a layout yard. It's been leased for 6 months. Project is expected to take about 3 months. So that lease is up in November. They've already started occupying the property. If you go by there, you'll see lights and trailers and workers out there. Their plan is to clean up the entire property. That's visual from the road. So all the boats and all that trash has been dumped out there. They will clean that up and it will be gone. But that is that's ongoing right now.
The other update on that then is the 21st, is that right? Next Thursday, we do have a meeting with property owners to talk about long-term plans and several other folks they have involved about long-term plans for that site. So things seem to be moving in a positive direction. James, I appreciate you working with property owners, and you've spent quite a bit of time trying to coordinate, making sure that things are headed in the right direction. Do my best. Any other questions?
Have you had any questions about the storage of vehicles at 200 or 2nd Street?
On 2nd Street.
Well, yeah.
The auto shop.
Yeah.
I have not had any questions or anything brought to me.
I have met with the operator of the facility. I'm trying to revise or come up with some suggested revisions for you to consider as far as the operation of this facility. He is having a very difficult time living within the conditional zoning conditions that were applied to him. And I have to agree that some of them, as to hours of operation, a few other things are a little not unreasonable maybe, but difficult for him to live by and still run his business. He has requested the permission to put a fence in the side yard to try to hide some of those cars that are out front. Unfortunately, the road right away from 2nd Street is very wide. It doesn't leave him a lot of space to build a fence. I'm not sure it's going to be functional to hide any of those vehicles. I need to hammer out some revisions and bring them back to you and get y'all to agree that they are reasonable changes to the original condition. If you are willing to accept that, then we'll make some improvements. If you're not willing to accept it, then we have to put him out of business.
I think originally he was supposed to do some landscaping along the 2nd Street before they did, but
He's done some cleaning up. He showed me the invoices for 6 truckloads of gravel that he put on his front parking lot. The corner where it's damaged, the curbing and sidewalk are damaged. It's state road, so it's state curb and guttering. NCDOT is not very responsive to coming in and fixing something like that. It's not a hazard for traffic. So everything we take a step forward on, we run into a roadblock. And I'm trying to find a way to keep him in business and keep you in the town happy. I haven't quite found that happy medium yet, so I haven't brought it to you.
Well, if memory serves me correctly, we sat here back last summer when we had to bring that property into compliance. And he was in an agreement that he was going to do all these things and stop parking vehicles, in the front. And yet things have gradually slid in the direction.
I totally agree, and I sympathize with the fact that I was in this meeting, in the audience during that meeting, watching your action on that. And I sat actually behind Mr. King. He was in the audience. Again, I think the two options boil down to finding some less restrictive conditions that you can live with, or enforcing the current conditions and putting them out there?
So just from my perspective, we spent a great amount of time working through the conditions of that, to which he indicated he could agree with. And I think if he's now realizing that he can't live with those, the way that I look at it is that to me means that that property is not suitable for the type of operation that he wishes to run. And if that's the case, we shouldn't change our ordinances to make a piece of property fit for something that it wasn't originally intended to fit. So it seems like we're having to stretch a lot more. I guess my question is, what is he stretching?
Well, we've had some very exciting conversations about.
I can imagine.
As a planner and a zoning administrator, we have to walk a line sometimes between trying to help a business exist and protecting the community from the impacts of an incorrect use of a piece of property. In this case, as you will remember, he leased the property from a property owner, started his business, invested many, many dollars in trying to get it ready to run an operation, and only found out after the fact that he was not zoned for that particular use. So he came into the process with tens of thousands of dollars in the coffers that if he didn't get approved was going to be flushed down the toilet. So in his mind, his hands were tied as far as whether he could agree or disagree with conditions that were imposed on him. The question this board should have asked itself during that process is, do you want an automobile repair shop on that piece of property? If the answer was no, then you shouldn't have gone through the process. You should have voted no on the conditional rezoning. To try to fix the impacts of the business by especially trying to control his operation. In zoning and subdivision business, we're into appearances, where the building's located on the site, whether buffering is required, whether fences are required, et cetera, et cetera. Rarely do we get into telling people what time in the morning they can open their business. They open their business based on the market demand. And yet one of the conditions you pass controls his hours of operation. Another condition, as is pointed out, is how many cars can be parked out front. It allows him to have one show car, but it allows him unlimited amounts of employees' cars or customer cars. I agree that when I drive by there on a Sunday, there's still a number of cars out front. I don't think they're employees' cars. I don't think they're customer cars. I think they're work cars. Somebody's brought the project in that's been parked there. If you walk around back and look, it's completely filled with cars. The fenced-in area on the left is completely filled with cars. And now he's trying, like I say, to put a fence up on the right-hand side. So I don't want to beat the dead horse too hard. If the board's decision is to strictly enforce the current conditions, that's what we will do. But it will be very short term before he closes up and goes somewhere else. So you'll have to make that decision if that's the way you want to go with it, the way you want to proceed.
I will say this to the board. I mean, part of the reason for those stipulations was because of the input we got from the surrounding neighbors. And so my opinion is that we owe it to them to enforce the stipulations that he agreed to.
I still hear a lot of complaints, and they always bring up the beautiful community garden. And then there's that they use eyesore right across the street.
And regardless of that, I mean, I think for us as a board, it's the matter of we put a conditional use permit in place. He agreed to the conditions. They were actually mutually agreed upon. I mean, it wasn't like we just arbitrarily set them. We asked him if he could, in person, if he could these things. He indicated he could. So, you know, I am as pro-business as anyone in this community, but I also am, when somebody gives their word on something, I expect them to.
If that's the feeling of the board, then we'll proceed in that
That's
direction.
the feeling of me. It's the feeling of the board. That's what it's up to y'all what you want to direct staff.
I agree with you.
He's still telling customers that Spencer didn't want him here.
I realize part of the problem is probably because he's taking in so many customers, he can't get the parts for these cars, and that's why they're parked out in front. I understand that, and that's logical as far as that goes. Some way, I would like to see us work a little bit to help him a little bit, but at the same time,
the thing is, there are other properties in town that are available that are much more conducive to an automotive repair.
I agree. He's probably got a pretty good deal on that property as far as that goes. And I guess he's still leasing it. That is my understanding is that right. And the bad thing about it, if they leave out, like we've talked before, what's going to move in there? Because it's an unusual business because it's a buffer between the fire station, the rest of the town, and the residential area, and it's very important.
And some of the things that you're worried about, the thing that's most obvious to me is a lot of cars sitting in the front parking lot in strange all hours of the day.
Yeah, I think if he remove some of those, I don't think too many people would fuss about that.
But if an acceptable to the ordinance under the current zoning classification were to move in, they could park all the cars they want, and we wouldn't have any control of it.
I understand.
So it's again, be careful what you ask for. You pointed it out. If he moves out something that is allowed by your C-29 zoning can move in, and it could be a long list of things. So again, if the board's feeling is to strictly enforce the approved conditions, then that's what we will do. But like I say, I had planned to bring you something as a list of options. They're not going to solve the number of cars parked out front. They would probably request that you allow longer work hours, start earlier and end a little later. Visually, I think the biggest objection is the number of cars sitting out front. I'm not sure.
So as not to waste Mr. Blunt's precious time over the course of the next month. Well, over the course of the next month, I mean, is that something you want him to bring to you, or do you want to tell him tonight that we need to enforce it as written?
I'm gonna weigh in. I have, excuse me, no problem enforcing our ordinance. I have no problem enforcing what we as a board and he collectively agreed to. When you stand up and say you're going to do something, I expect you're going to do it because that's what I do in my life, or at least I try to. And I think that's what we do as a town. At least I think we do. But it's here. It's a problem that, if we want to call it a problem, I'm going to use the word. It's an issue because we're talking about it. It's an issue that we have. I think I would be interested in hearing what you can come up with and what he is willing to agree to. But the car thing, I think, is a problem. And that was what, when the folks in that neighborhood came, and those who wrote in and those who called in or by Zoom or whatever, they talked about the car. They didn't want it to look like a parking lot. And I think for me, I would be willing to entertain things about longer business hours. I'm not sure we should be in the business of legislating when people open and close. That seems problematic to me. Yeah. But with that said, I think the cars thing is going to have to be something he's going to have to give on, at least to get my support, at least to some degree, and maybe we can relax that a little bit. But that's what the folks who are here, they were concerned about that, and we politely blew them off and let him stay open with some restrictions. So I'm willing to hear what you can come up with and what he's willing to agree to, but there's going to have to be some give and take, I think.
So kind of what I'm hearing at this point, let's let Mr. Blunt come back to us, see what recommendations he has, and then we can consider it in detail and truly beat the horse to death, the dead horse.
You were just trying to find a way to make this meeting last 2 hours.
That's right, apparently.
I'll jump on.
Okay.
Anything else for myself at this point?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Chief File.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board.
Good evening.
My folder's thin tonight, so I'll try to keep it quick. You received my monthly report as usual. Call volume tends to be where it is right now for summer months. Some lines are up a little bit, some lines are down a little bit. If you notice, we did continue our school check program, so even though we had a limited amount of time that was involving summer school, we did still manage to do about 150 school checks. So we're trying to continue that process even when there's only a few staff members there. It gets the officers a little extra time in the school, get a little more comfortable with the surroundings there. I was going to do a kind of a quick presentation. I know we talked about doing a presentation on school safety and our response to active shooters. Myself and Chief Lanning and Sergeant Leonard actually attended a class in the last week called Managing the First 30 Minutes of a Mass Violence Incident. You know, the first thing they said, the second slide in there, was loose lips sink ships and don't talk about it in public. So I think that's probably what I'm going to do. I do want to give the board a little bit of information, though. I will tell you that all the officers are going to continue going through the schools as they did this year. As our staff increases, we're going to see even an increase in what the numbers you've been seeing. So I would anticipate on a standard school day, there'll be somewhere around 10 checks done in our schools by our staff. So if you can imagine, I believe our numbers for this past year was about 1,200 checks that we did at our 3 schools. So we'll probably tip out somewhere between 1,800 and 2,000 checks for this coming school year once we go up to a full staff here. As kind of I guess a preschool get ready event, if you want to call it that. I've been meeting with each principal, especially since we have some new principals in the schools. I just actually met with Ms. Rossmeyer at the elementary school yesterday. We spent about 2 hours doing a school walkthrough, going through every classroom, every door, and finding every issue that could be a problem. So that's something that hasn't been done in the past. Not that it was neglected, it's just something different and a new approach to it. So we're doing that at all 3 schools. Additionally, every officer in the department will visit all 3 schools and go be walked through our security plan. That's where I'm going to stop as far as what I'm going to explain about our security plan, solely for not having it broadcast out for somebody that could be watching that we wouldn't want to know. I will say that I met with, at the Chiefs meeting today, we met with the Director of Rural and Emergency Services. They are beginning a program to do the events that I briefly spoke about before. They're doing some tabletop events. They've actually already done a few. They have invited me to go and watch a small-scale event next week. There again, I cannot tell you where it's at, but there will be a small-scale event next week that I will be going as an observer. I haven't invited him yet, but Chief Lanning's invited to go with me, so I hope he joins me on that. I did invite them to do an event here and for us to host it. So at some point in time during this school year, when it's approved by the school, we're going to try to do an event here hopefully. Obviously, that would not be broadcast, would not be up to the public. It's going to be kind of something that's done out of sight, out of mind, and that way it's a little bit of training for our guys. Additionally, as this program across the county continues, the thought is to invite officers from across the county to other schools. We never know where we're going to be at. If something happened at Hanford Dole, we're obviously probably going to be the first people there, or one of the first people to respond to it. So the idea is to get officers from other agencies to kind of mix in at these other schools. So it's something that's been done in the past to a little bit smaller extent. It's something that they've been working on for a number of years, and it kind of took a hit during COVID. So I'm glad to see it's ramping back up. We've got a lot of good support from the chiefs across the county. So I believe we're going to see a lot of positive stuff from that. Before I jump to anything else, is there any questions about that?
No question for me, just thank you.
Thank
Very,
you
very much.
Definitely,
I think that's
definitely.
good.
Hate I can't say more, but I think everybody
You
understands
said
kind of the
enough.
reason
That's
behind it.
enough.
That's
We understand.
exactly what I wanted to hear, so.
Perfect, perfect. Another vehicle is broke down, which we know that was coming. Fortunately, we have 3 of our trucks have delivered by rail car, but we do not have them yet. So they have delivered to what they call a drop-off yard. So I would anticipate somewhere in the next 60 days, we'll probably see 3 new vehicles hitting the road, which thank goodness, because we got ones that are breaking that we can't repair right now. So we're in a little bit of a bind on that, but we're working through it. As far as the staffing issue goes, we still have 5 positions open. We have had those positions posted, and we've received some good applicants for it. We have began doing our oral board assessments and written exams for the ones that we're looking at bringing in. We've identified 2 good candidates would be BLET cadets. We have one that has already been secured a spot in the class that starts on August 8th. We're working on getting the second candidate. He's a few weeks behind in the process, but as soon as we get him caught up, there's a second one we identified that will be a good candidate to send to school. So once we get that done, that will be our intent, is to send a second one through basic law enforcement training. Additionally, we have a few lateral applicants that have applied for our what we call special service sergeant, which would be the position I've previously held, which now would be over investigations, school resource officers, and code enforcement. So we have some candidates that have applied for that. We'll be beginning that process next week. We have some candidates that have applied for our open detective position. We will also intend on beginning that process next week. So hopefully we will bring in a few individuals within the next, we're going to say 30 to 45 days. It takes a little bit of time to get their full background done and get the paperwork sent off to Raleigh. Our desire is to have within the next 30 or 45 days 2 new full-time staffers, and 2 that would be assigned to basic law enforcement training as a paid employee. That will leave us with 1 additional opening, which my hope is to find a lateral applicant that's already certified for that position. It's very hard to find right now. I will tell you that I met with the director of BLET today, and as I think I mentioned previously, everybody that's been going through is pre-hired. He has 45 applicants for BLET right now. I know 22 of those are the daytime class, and every single one's already pre-hired. Before, I mean, we're a month before class starts. So that kind of tells you what the market is right now. People are hard to find, and it's really hard to entice people to move agencies. There's going to be a lot of changes in this county with the sheriff changing, some retirements going on in the county. We're really going to have to see where things go. But my intent is to try to hold that spot right now for a lateral applicant, because that's somebody that will be able to hit the ground working much sooner than if we had to send a 3rd person through training. Try to give us a little more experience on the street instead of solely having young officers out here. As far as our restructure goes, we began that. We've done 2 promotions. I think everybody probably saw that on Facebook. So Officer Comer and Officer Reed both have been promoted to corporal. So that is continuing the plan of having a senior officer paired with junior officers on the road, solely for, it's really for a logistical reason. We won't have somebody that has a little more knowledge out here paired with the younger officers. When we have those questions arise, they can take care of that on the street. First waking me up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Do not mind, but it will be nice to have that structure set up with a little depth on our structure chart. One last thing, August 2nd, National Night Out. So we have began that process. Definitely everybody is invited. You'll see more about that probably this coming week. We have already partnered with some community members. We've already received some support for it, and invited some of the same outside entities that helped last year with the organization of it. So I think it'll be bigger and better. Again, we plan to have a staged event with the police department and fire department, kind of an anti-drinking and driving event that will be a one-time event. We will lights and sirens to get everybody's attention, and then we will do our staged event. It'll be one, like I say, it'll be a one-time thing. So at some point in there, everything will kind of stop for about 20 minutes while we do that. But other than that, it'll be a very similar event to last year, with booths set up, food provided, everything is free, and we did get community support for that again. So I look forward to that. Hope everybody's able to join us for it. Now we'll entertain any questions you have.
Any questions? What is the time for the next?
That's 5:30 to 8 p.m.
Thank you so
That's
much.
the first Tuesday. So it'll be August 2nd.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you
All right,
very
thank
much.
you.
Right?
All right, Chief Lanning, Fire Department.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Board. Report is there before you guys. There's a couple things I want to highlight. We'll kind of skim across some of it. We ran some calls, did our job. Fireworks was great. I don't know if everyone here attended or not, but there was roughly 2,500 people in attendance, according to the museum. Everything went smooth. A couple spot fires out back where the fireworks were being shot off, but nothing got out of hand. Want to thank the mayor and town manager for coming to the Coffee with the Chiefs event this morning. I think slowly, month by month, we're seeing it grow. It's, crawl, walk, run. So we'll get there. Big thing, which is was a disappointment, I guess, or maybe just a hurdle in the road. One of our full timers did turn his resignation in. Got a better job offer. I'm not gonna say better. Got a job offer closer to home, which better fit his family. Like I told him, hate to see him go. Wish we could keep him. But family comes first. Whether it's convenient for us in the town or it's not, that's his priority, and I completely understand. Last week did appoint one of our part-time firemen to part-time deputy chief. Been with Spencer for almost 5 years. I am extremely excited. It will give me some additional breathing room. I won't stress as much if I want to go out of town with my family on vacation. I'll have somebody to kind of fill that void. As of last Friday, called FEMA. We obviously have not heard anything from the SAFER grant. They advised me that they've not even started issuing the AFG grant, or Assistance Firefighters grant. Once that is done, the SAFER will begin. It is postponed farther than they wanted it to be this year so far, but they said it will be coming. Last thing, Chief Al brought up, and went to that active assailant class last week, which was great. I was invited to a tabletop next week. Haven't invited him. It's probably the same one. We're going to invite each other. I did meet with a couple of chiefs from the city of Salisbury last week, this week, to discuss some things, and that was one of the things that came up. Was one, the counties wanting to do kind of like a county-wide policy. Will that fit municipalities just as well as it will rural departments? Who knows? But they did share a draft policy that the city has adopted with fire and police, and I've got that to share with Chief Al and kind of try to model that if we feel that that's appropriate for us. It was eye-opening for me. I've taken active shooter stuff years ago, and the more updated model, it's definitely a different approach. So I think give us a couple months, we'll have a pretty good policy in place for that. Any questions for me?
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Taylor, Public Works.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. Again. Just to let everybody know, our regular services, we were behind on the brush pickup after those couple storms we had, but we have caught back up, so we're running on schedule now. Just to note, the citizens, if they are watching, please bag your small debris and leaves. There's piles of it everywhere, and we're trying to get it up what's there, but for the summer months, let's please put it in bags. Keeps it out of the storm drain. When these little pop-up storms come, it can get interesting at times, especially over Mr. Muhammad's area. If those storm drains get clogged up, it gets deep quick. So just a note. As of last month, the mayor mentioned and talked to Rodney about the bus shelter. So I did reach out to Rodney. Rodney advised me at this time not to put that bus shelter there. That the micro transit was going to take over that aspect, and if it does, then the pickup will actually be on the other side of the street, at the apartments, since they're the primary users of that bus stop. So he said, hold on to it. Don't do anything at this point. If that comes to fruition, then what we'll do is we'll put that shelter on that side of the street and let them use it on that side. So I called off of the sidewalk for, and we still did some sidewalk work, but I didn't do that part. So I'm glad he advised that, because that could have been costly to us. I would like to announce that our mechanic, Chad Eagle, has taken, I guess it would be a promotion. He is now our labor foreman, so he is filling that role. Actually, he's going to be filling both roles, just like we have been for the last while until we can get a mechanic. But that job has been posted. Have we received any yet? Nothing yet. Okay. Well, it's only been a couple days since it's been posted, so. But he'll still be filling that role, and even once again, training him until he gets into into the routine of what's going on. So, CCAP update. I just that's funny. I just spoke with Cindy. Cindy was actually on vacation last week. Was the reason I couldn't get in touch with her. So, and I'm going to be on vacation next week. So, the date is set for July the 27th at 2 o'clock. We're going to do our best to make that work and get back with our homeowners so we can get this moving on. So we drug it enough. So, we're ready to get going. And that was the date that she came up with. So we'll check and see if that works out for everyone. The portion of sidewalk that I did mention is on 2nd Street. It's in the first block and actually helped coming towards the community garden. There were some pieces missing in that area. Previous utility work, I'm not sure exactly why it was missing, but we did replace it and several others up through there. So we'll be back filling that as soon as we can get some dry dirt. Which also need to put some in the planters. So as soon as we can get some dry dirt, we'll be taking care of that as well. So I'll be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Warren, Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, I have one, Joel.
Yes, sir.
This item number 6, the hole that's opened up on 2nd Street.
Okay.
That's draining under that street down under the park, and then is it affecting Rowan Avenue yet, or?
No, it's actually on the 2nd Street side.
Okay.
If you know where the test well is,
yeah.
Which I feel sure a lot of you do know where the test well. It's actually just above that. Well, depending on which way you're coming, it would be towards the Salisbury Avenue side of where the test well is. So the test well, I don't think is the problem. I'm almost positive it's not. The problem is the line that goes under and into Rowan Park. So it's on the side of 2nd Street. There's cones or barrels there. Now we have packed that hole full of stone all the way up and then put some dirt on top of it. For the time being, and I'll be honest, we haven't had time to investigate any further. I know that pipe's deep. I know it's very deep.
That might be something we want to take a long range look at that comes off of Denny Patterson's old property there at the Yadkin.
Yes, sir.
3rd Street comes under that. That's the so-called railroad property.
Correct.
Snakes down through there. I know there's been problems there over the years in the past.
Right. My plan is that is an opening because the pipe does start. It opens up and skips that property. It stays above ground for that property. So there's an outlet right there or an inlet. So actually I can run a camera that way and see what's happening. There again, I just haven't had time to schedule. I've had a couple guys out, so we've been filling in where and what keep operations going. But yes, sir. It is full at this point. There's not a danger to anybody. We left the cones and barrels there to try to warn people, you know what I mean? Don't step in it, don't walk in it, don't drive in it if you have to. But if a car would happen to steer off in it, they're fine. There's enough material in there. It's not a problem. And we're keeping an eye on it. If it does settle, we're going to keep packing it in there until we can get a little further with it.
Well, I think there may be a problem. I think is there a street that comes down? There's like a Y or something. There's a property that has a lot of daylilies on it. Is that like kind of across the street from where those homes are? I don't know what street it is, but I think there's a problem that's maybe just up the hill from that where there's some holes coming in the road. I'm not sure what street. I drive the back streets lots of times.
Right.
But it's near that location.
I think
It's
so.
near that
I
location?
think so.
Daylily
On the
corner.
opposite side of the street from where the cones are.
That's what he's talking about that house back there. It floods that in the back, and it's from Danny Patterson's lot and everything else. So that's all one area. That's kind of a gray area anyway.
But, yeah, but they're staying in the street, and
I
that's
think-
what I'm
I think
questioning.
that's-
You're talking about the house on the corner of First Street,
Is that where it is?
That's where a bunch of daylilies are.
Okay, well, I think it's right there that there was some problems with that,
Okay.
with that.
You'll
street.
check it out.
I will check it, in that area, I will check the streets, and we'll make sure we don't have
And if-
anything going on.
and if- I'll try to remember that.
Okay, if you do,
To
send me
figure
a
out where it
message.
is.
Absolutely.
Put 'em right there.
If you run across it and get an actual ad, let me know, you know what I mean? But I'll look in that area to make sure we don't have anything else going on.
I'm actually looking for white squirrels.
They are here.
I saw one once, and I want to see them again.
Throw myself in front of them.
fence.
Has to be so much.
I don't think they're right.
18
All right.
inches.
Very good. Thank you
very much.
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Softly, Finance Department.
Good Mayor and board members.
Good evening.
You have your finance report in there, and I just want to make sure you understand this is a very preliminary. But if you flip over to page 15, one of the things that you will observe is even at this point, the town is showing at least a $200,000 increase. Now, this does not include 2 more receipts of sales tax, nor does it include another payment on utilities franchise tax. So I anticipate those to be at least 200. They could be more. The last 2 months, we have received approximately $90,000 each month on our sales tax, which has been actually way higher than what we had gotten. Now, obviously, I don't expect that going forward, but you know, even if we get 70,000 in the next 2 months, we'll easily get another 200,000. Now, the flip side of that is that we're also adding expenses to this too. There's an accrual of 1.5 payrolls yet to be added to this. Any payments that come in that were dated for the work or the good from 6/30 before that, even if it comes in within about through the middle of August, we'll backdate that back and put it into June because that's where the actual purchase occurred. So there's going to be continuing the expenses coming in and of course revenues. But even at that, we'll still have a very healthy year going forward. So that's the key point. And I don't want you to say, oh, this is what it was, because it's changing every day as we continue to make updates. So again, I think we had a good year. Now, one of the things that has occurred this year with the ARPA funds, and I know that there was a budget amendment that y'all approved that made a few changes, adopted a new budget ordinance for those. There's a number of policies, and I have a bunch of them here. Now, we're talking, earlier Kyle was talking about things for the CDBG. We've had to do similar things for the ARPA. So there are a number of policies that the town has adopted. The manager has approved these and been co-signed by our town clerk to put us in compliance. We anticipate the beginning of using the allocation of actually using the salaries, which we're going to do, with the next payroll when it begins. So that's when we'll actually start looking at the salaries and supplanting those salaries. So it'll be with the next full payroll that will be done. So I'm excited about that and actually start utilizing some of those monies as they were intended rather than just sitting in a bank account, and which obviously will give the board here an opportunity to utilize those supplanted funds elsewhere. So again, look forward to that, and staff's been working hard trying to get to this point. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions on the finance report? All right. Do you want to give your update on the audit now, or do you want to wait until
It's up to the board.
right after the library? Let's do the library report, and then we'll bring you right back up.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and board members. I'd just like to highlight that on July the 19th, around 3:30 at the library, we'll be hosting more of the local superpowers. And so Brittany Ellis, she's a North Rowan High School sophomore that is a champion shot put, a cheerleader by the name of Malaya Snyder, and a gymnast. She will be there. They'll be showing off some of their superpowers. And then Jamar Harris is a musician. The library has had some attendance increases from 70 to around 100, 70 people and around 100 books checked out between children and adults. The goal this year is 1,000 books, and currently are at 495 books checked out. Do you have any questions?
Any questions on the library? Thank you. All right. And now we'll invite Mr. Softly to come back up, and we will consider the audit contract amendment.
Yes. You have an audit contract amendment in front of you. I've been on the phone a lot with the auditor, going through the statements. As you recall, he indicated that they were having issues trying to get it reconciled. The reason they had some problems reconciling it was because whenever you put together a financial model, which I've done before, for a financial statement, if you don't get your links correct to the correct number, it'll never balance. And they had some bad links. They have been resolved. The statements are in balance. I talked to him as recently as last night at 10:30 when he called. Hey, I've been on the phone a lot.
10:30.
10:30, yes. I'm pushing him, trying to.
Thank you.
The links are there. The statements are balanced. He was going through, making sure that the numbers on those statements were truly carried to all of the statistical statements and to the MD&A in the report, and also the notes to the financial statement. I had anticipated getting the updated report this morning. Unfortunately, he was sick today. So I have sent him a note, hoping he gets better, and they call me as soon as he gets to the office. So, but with
we
that,
might all be sick tomorrow.
I might be sick. However, even if I had a report, it couldn't be submitted because the LGC will not accept that report without an updated contract. So that's what the contract here for is, so that we can actually submit it. So again, there's no additional cost to this. It's based,
So yet another formality that we have to do.
Thought it was finished.
Right. Will the board need to take any action once the audit is complete?
No. You will receive a report, right? But that's it.
I like this heading that says plan to prevent future late submissions.
Yeah. Well, the positive, if there is a positive here, once you have a financial statement built that you can drop your trial balance into, and then it will actually populate your statement. That's a big thing. So that's not having that finally in place makes a difference. But it wasn't.
All right. Any questions? Thanks for the late night phone calls and sticking with it.
Wasn't my latest, I'd say that.
All right. So is there a motion from the board to amend the contract a final time?
I move
the final.
I move
I
to
am.
approve an extension
Final.
of this contract.
All right. There's a motion by Ms. Sledge, a second by Mr. Muhammad. All in favor? All right. All opposed? All right, there is one in opposition. All right, so that is approved. Thank you very much. All right, town manager report, Mr. Franzese.
Well, thank you, Mayor and members of the board. Appreciate everyone's continued efforts throughout humid weather, pleasant weather, storms, insects, anything that comes along. Our folks are there, and
Hammerheads, worms too.
There we go. Invertebrates even. Yeah. So appreciate everyone working together to get us where we want to be. I do have a few updates to note. One, our backup generator. Thought it was well. It arrived. Thought it was installed, and then it disappeared. And fortunately, I pulled up the morning when the crane truck was there and watched it disappear. And it's not that I pulled up and wondered where it went. But apparently,
did it fall in a hole?
Apparently, the generator that we received was one that was set up for propane rather than natural gas.
Of course.
And that was determined after some period, I guess it took to get to a certain point in the installation to
you can't make this stuff
to
up.
resolve that. So to understand that, but the correction could not be made in the field. The manufacturer had to take it back and send us another. We don't have a date on when that one's going to come.
The day it went away, the power went off too.
Yeah. All that auditor's fault. That's what it is.
So that that would have been great to have over the last month or so with some of the weather we've had. But as soon as we know more, we'll keep you updated on that. Do you have a question on that?
No, I was just here when the power went off.
Yes.
Same day that the generator left.
And then I think many people are aware of this, but we certainly wanted to share it in this forum that Spencer was one of 30 communities across the North Carolina awarded the Rural Transformation Grant that is worth $900,000 towards our effort to build the park in front of the Town Hall and Police Department. Our application was part of a strategy to assemble the funding that we did, as you'll recall, have the base project concept of about $1.2 million with then a list of another $1.1 million of add alternates to enhance the project. And our goal at the time of applying for both this and the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant was that a successful part of grant would get us the base park, and that the Rural Transformation Grant would get us a long way in enhancing the park. And we found out the news about that one first, which was outstanding. Really proud of the team. Is certainly Joe Morris for his efforts in that application. He reached out to the Transportation Museum and the Tourism Authority staff and we believe that a lot of the information that they were able to contribute to our application is what made us successful in this. And in fact, Joe has gotten calls from communities across the state wanting to know, how'd you do it? And finally, Joe reached out to the Commerce staff at some point and was mentioning all these contacts. And the person said, "Oh yeah, we're telling them to call y'all because you had the best application."
Oh,
Yeah,
very good.
Yeah,
So
Thank you, Joe.
that was
You do some work around here, don't you?
Nice
just a little bit. A little bit.
Hides in the back though.
Joe's trying to lay low this month. So, but that was outstanding news. We're excited about that. We expect to hear in the fall, maybe September time frame. Joe, is that correct about Cardiff? Yep. So as we await that, we'll do that and hopefully have some more good news. But we'll go from there. and we talked earlier about the trailhead, of course. As you heard from Steve earlier, the bid process is open for that, and the bid opening will be July 21st. And we'll hopefully get good news on that front and be able to proceed with that project. Dragon Boat. We have a Dragon Boat team. Where the Dragon Boat Festival is an exciting thing here in Rowan County, and Spencer is going to be part of it on July 23rd. We are still looking for paddlers.
Mike Shue and Michael Lanning and Joel Taylor have also volunteered.
So to be a paddler,
I got your attention.
To be a paddler, you just have to be 14 years old and willing to have fun. And we need a minimum of 16. We're currently at about 15 or maybe close to 16. Steve Miller had a few names that might get us to 16. But ideally, we'd have 20 paddlers, and we'd, I think, have as high as 26, including alternate paddlers.
Carl Blankenship, you can come and do it. You can get the live scoop from the boat.
There you go. So I just say all that to there's been a lot of folks interested in joining in, and we appreciate that. If you're interested from the community, certainly be in touch with us, and we'll get you signed up. We'd love to have you part of this. And it is a kind of an open event to the public. So even if you don't want to grab a paddle, come on out and see us have some fun.
There will be an audition, though.
I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Sherry wanted me to ask you to remove me from the rowing team because I keep running around the house hollering at the top of my lungs, prepare to repel all boarders. So it's scaring the neighbors.
Well, let me, if you can find 2 replacements, I'll consider it.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Frenzies? All right. Hearing none, we're now at the point of requests and comments by the mayor and board members, and I will say the mayor has no request or comments, so we'll open it up to everybody else. We'll start with Ms. Sledge. Every time. I'm predictable.
I was trying to think. It seemed like there was something that I wanted to be sure to say, but I'm not sure what it was now. Again, I will say that Central Methodist Church is trying to feed the children of the community. So if you have a child between the ages of 3 and 18, please come down to the church at 11:05 to receive a free meal. They're being prepared by the yes, I think it's the USDA government program, and it's available for anyone who wants to come. We do ask that you eat it there at the church, and they're not they're not pressing anything on you. Just come and eat. The bread riot is also scheduled to come back again, and I believe it may be tomorrow. So that's an opportunity to get free produce. The Bread Riot is a group that gathers produce from farmers around the area, and they distribute it to the community. And you can come and get the produce. If you can make a donation, fine. If you can't make a donation, the produce is free, and it's really nice produce. So come to the Central Methodist Church. Again, that is tomorrow from 11 until 1, I believe, is the hours on that. I think that's maybe all I have to say. I will be attending a meeting of the Central Carolina Council of Government prior to our next meeting, I believe, and the EDC is tomorrow. No, Thursday.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Muhammad.
Okay. First of all, I again would like to thank all the members of the board as well as the mayor, staff, and department heads for all the hard work and dedication that they've been giving the town. Good to see that we're doing things that involve the citizens, the cruise-in, the up-and-coming movie night. I would also like to see us get back to the food truck events that we had a few years ago, because that truly involved a lot of people within the community and outside of the community, and they were very safe events. And I think that would also be something good, for us to utilize this parking lot as well. Other than that, I don't have much to say. Thank you, Mr. Muhammad. Absolutely.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I like the food truck idea, so that would be a nice thing to do. I think they did it on Friday.
Food truck Friday.
And I want to thank Sam for coming up with movie night. I think that's something great for the community. And I want to issue a big thank you to all of the people who are sprucing up their homes. I noticed the home back here, straight back on Rowan Avenue, second house on the left, that's past 4th Street. They've just gotten a new coat of paint and it really looks nice. And I wanted to close with this positive thing. Across the street from me, there are some contractors that have come in and are redoing a house on Rowan Avenue, and they're from Texas. And they like it so much here, they said they're planning on trying to relocate their business here, that they love this town. Everybody has been so friendly and helpful, and they want to invest in some of these properties. So I thought that was nice to hear, though.
Their last name isn't Gaines. No, not Chip and Joanna? Okay.
Be nice.
All right, thank you. Mr. Howe.
I think it's already been mentioned, but the fireworks, and I know more of the Transportation Museum than us, but as a community, that was amazing. I had a really hard time finding a place to park. Now, I'm not sure that I can actually park where I park, so I'm not going to tell you where I park. But I parked there anyway, and that was a really neat event. I've been up here for a lot of things with Thomas and that type of thing. I don't think I ever recall it being quite so full as that. That was really cool. I do want to say, and I know we talked about historic preservation. Thank you, Day. That's amazing. I think you guys are doing a great job. And I just want to reiterate, it's, I think, really important that along with that, that face-to-face time with the folks who maybe don't have the means or the time or the energy or the just the ability maybe even to do those types of things, that we're doing that face-to-face time both as a town and as a community, and helping those people who need the help. I think I saw in the report the house on 2nd Street that someone mentioned earlier, the big tree, I just collapsed the side of their house, which is awful. And then we talked about the folks down on the with the car went through their living room, what it was a few months ago. I mean, I think those types of situations where we as a town and we as a community do as much as we can to get those folks the help they need. I know I'm not necessarily talking about financial help. I'm talking about just help. And if that means we all show up with a truck and a shovel and we do what we can, that's fine. But I just think we need to make sure that we, both as a board, as a town, and as a community, we're cognizant that it's more than just just meetings and documents and passing things. It's about making sure that we deliver more tangible and sometimes intangible things. And I'll leave it.
Mr. Howe. Mr. Morgan.
Well, the world seems hell-bent on self-destruction and chaos, but we live in a world of unprecedented times, and I just you turn on television, just about every time you do that, all you see is bad news. And yet here we are in our small community trying to do the right thing by our people, by our staff, with all our faults, with everything that's going on. I want to commend our entire staff, and that's police department, fire department, administration. We are sort of the calm in the eye of the storm, and I hope that we can continue in that direction. I hope that we can do things that inspire our neighbors to take better care of themselves, better care of their properties, and take better care of each other. Only by interacting, and COVID's gone a long way to kill any kind of interaction among people. And I'm hoping that we can return to a sense of normalcy where we can share company with our neighbors on their front porches or their back porches, and start to do things again with our friends, families, and our neighbors. So again, my hat's off to all of you for continuing in those efforts and continuing to put forth, taking your own time to do the things, volunteer for the various committees, and my hat's really off to you. And I hope that you will grab people that that could help us along the way. I know that some of our committees still lack several members. I think the zoning board still lacks a few, adjuncts or, and I know that there have to be people within our community, but there are a lot of people that have moved into the community that haven't got to know us, and we haven't gotten to know them. And only through better communication, through our website, through our newsletter, through Facebook page, and just talking among our neighbors, are we going to be able to continue to grow and grow in a manner that still retains our small town atmosphere. I don't want this town to become another Concord. I don't want this town to become another Mooresville or Charlotte, God forbid, and get buried under development. I want to retain the pleasant and I guess you'd call it the genteel Southern spirit, Southern tradition and mannerism and manners that seem to have been thrown out with the bathwater over the past couple of decades. So, to all of you, please keep up the good work and continue to do the right thing. Thanks.
Mr. Morgan, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to follow something like that, but I'll try anyway. But, when you don't hit as a representative for the town, people come to you and complain about different things and how the city is run, town's run, and everything else. But, over the last 2.5 years, 3 years, whatever I've been on the board, I've heard very few complaints, and that says a whole lot about our town staff. And just like everybody said, I'm very proud to be a member of that town staff, and I'm glad I can represent you. Now, I want to say one other thing about this board. 2.5 years ago, I planned a little vacation with my wife, and we were going to a country out across the ocean, and unfortunately, it got postponed because of COVID. Now, I didn't plan not to be at this meeting last month, but it seemed to be a very heated conversation on several things. But I will have to commend this board to make compromises and try to work together. I know we can't please everybody in our community, but at the same time, we need to work together to make Spencer a better community. And that's what this board's all about. And I am proud to be a member of this board, and I think they do an outstanding good job. Even though they kind of long on the tooth a little bit sometimes.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thanks, friend.
All right. With that, is there a need this evening to go into executive session? All right. Is there a motion to go into executive session? And if so, I do believe the reason is for legal counsel.
That is correct.
Okay. So
I move that we recess this meeting and go into
just that we go into closed session.
Go into closed session.
All right. Motion by Ms. Sledge. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Howe. All in favor? All right. All opposed? All right, we stand in closed session at this point. We will take a very short recess because it should be a very quick update, and then we'll be back.